I'm going to be looking for a relationship between words and phrases that I see in Romans 1, verses 1 and 2. The ESV version is a good word-for-word translation, so I will use it. To begin with, I see the connecting word therefore in verse 1. It seems to connect my text to the preceding verses. Therefore usually means because of, so I'm guessing the relationship between verse 1 and what preceded is because of what has already been said. Therefore, I appeal. Or it could mean because of what preceded. Therefore, do this. It could also have a double relationship. Therefore, I appeal and therefore do this. Since I don't know yet exactly what kind of relationship is intended, I will just put an arrow beside therefore so I can remind myself to find the relationship between verse 1 and the preceding verses. The writer, who I think is Paul, says, I appeal. He's trying to persuade his brothers to do something. I imagine Paul could look something like this. Appeal is an action word. This is what Paul is doing. He is appealing to his brothers, so I'm going to write the word brother and draw an arrow to connect Paul to the brother to show the relationship between them. Paul says to his brother, present your bodies. I'm going to write that above the arrow to show the relationship more clearly. I think presenting your bodies would look something like this. The brothers' bodies are to be presented by the mercies of God. By is not used to show where the by is used to show the means by which the brothers should present their bodies. So I will write by mercies of God underneath the arrow to show the means by which the bodies are presented. Brothers' bodies are to be presented as a living sacrifice. That's a metaphor. So I'm going to label the brother living sacrifice, and I'm going to add the words holy and acceptable because these words describe sacrifice. I think Paul wants the brothers to say something like, here is my body, God. The word which tells me that the phrase, which is your spiritual worship, is another way of saying present your bodies as a living sacrifice. So I'm going to add an equal sign to show that relationship. In verse 2, I see the words do not be and the words but be. Paul is making a contrast. I think I will show the contrast like this. I'm going to add by renewal to the arrow to show how the old mind is transformed into the new. This part of the verse makes me think about the mind in relation to the heart. I wonder how heart and mind are related in the Bible. It also makes me think that there must be something about being conformed to the world that somehow prevents being transformed. I wonder exactly what that is. I think I'm going to add those questions to my list. Why should the brother be transformed? So that through the method of testing, he can discern God's will. The word what is a clue, and what is good, acceptable, and perfect is another way of talking about God's will, so I'm going to show that relationship with equal marks. Now I wonder how verse 2 is related to verse 1. I noticed earlier that the word acceptable is repeated. Paul told brothers to present themselves as an acceptable sacrifice in verse 1, and to know what is acceptable in verse 2. So working backwards, I think that knowing what is acceptable requires a transformed mind. People conformed to this world cannot be living, holy, acceptable sacrifices. It makes sense that only people who are transformed, who can discern what is acceptable, can, by the mercies of God, present themselves as a holy and acceptable. In other words, only holy, transformed people can worship God. So I think the main relationship between verses 1 and 2 is that the mind transformed in verse 2 must necessary to perceive the spiritual worship commanded in verse 1. Perhaps you may see some relationships that I missed. Now I'm going to see if what I learned will help me answer some more of my questions, and then we'll move on to part 2. Investigate to know.